Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Wilson from CMW, and it's great to have you all here on this lovely sunny day for this morning's account management session. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker this morning, who is Jean Gomes, who is the chairman of the Energy Project UK. So this is a business that helps organisations create high-performance cultures by making sure that all of the people within them are able to perform at the very, very best of their ability. It's all about managing your energy. So Jean's got a great pedigree. He's worked with some of the innovative end of the corporate world, like Google and eBay and Apple. He's worked with some very different kinds of organisations, like the police force, and also some elite athletes, like the Women's Tennis Association. So he comes to us with a lot of success stories to share. We think this is a really valuable session for account management to enjoy, and it's the reason the Client Service Group wanted to put it on is one of the consistent pieces of feedback we get across the whole industry, everybody involved in the craft, whether you're in a small agency, a big agency, a digital agency, an ad agency, is that the demands of the job are increasing and increasing and increasing. So things are more complicated, whether it's your 300 emails a day, whether it's a day of meetings before you get to your actual day job, or whether it's simply the pace of client requests coming at you. It's not just communication that's always on. We all are as well. So Jean's valuable insight into this area is that we all spend a lot of time trying to manage our time better. And time is finite. The one thing that none of us in this room can ever have any more of, and that's time. But the difference that can be made is how you manage your energy. So that's why I'm really looking forward to this morning's session, and I'm delighted to introduce Jean.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, two small pieces of housekeeping. If you're tweeting this morning, as we hope you are, we're on hashtag IPAAM, which is gone, IPAAM, and we're going to do some Q&A afterwards, in which case, please hang on and we'll bring a mic to you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. About 2 weeks ago, Paul, my colleague at the back, and I were in a room about 30 miles away, and we were working with 20 of your clients, and they were the brand and global advertising team for a large retail bank. They have a budget of about £150 million a year to spend on their work. And the thing that defined this group was two things. Firstly, they were absolutely, fundamentally exhausted. Exhausted. I mean, you know, to the point where they could hardly keep their eyes open for the first half of the day until we kind of got them woken up and started. So they were drained beyond belief. And the second thing was they were incredibly negative about their company and about the agencies that they work for, or work with them. And we got them to kind of think differently about why that was the case. So I want to pick out 2 or 3 ideas from our work and share them with you. Hopefully not just to talk at you with theory, but to give you some very practical outcomes, some things that you can take away and start using straight away with both your teams and also with your clients. So our work is based on something called the science of high performance. We started 30 years ago working with elite athletes, people who are just naturally brilliant at managing their energy. And what we understood in working with those people was something that was profoundly different to all studies before. So all studies before on performance focused on something around skill, around aptitude, natural latent ability. What we found was that actually that wasn't the game changer. That wasn't what allowed you to be in the top 5%. It was about how you manage something different, a different dimension. So we're going to look at that. And this combines a range of things. It combines the latest advances in neuroscience. It looks at psychology and how that's developing. And it also looks at things that we've known for 2,000 years about how human beings are designed to perform at their best. And the reason why Google has embraced our work all around the world, everybody in Google goes through our programs, is because what I'm going to tell you, you already know. But there's a huge gulf between knowing something and doing something about it, isn't there? You can know something for your entire life, and actually the more intelligent you are, the more you can convince yourself that you're doing something about it. So the kind of no-do gap becomes larger and larger. So how many of you here are over 30? Ooh, I wouldn't have known. But there you go. You look so remarkably well. There's something that at the heart of how we manage ourselves, which we call the fatal assumption, which is that our energy expands naturally to meet demand. Is that true? Well, it is up to a point, isn't it? But there is a point at which that isn't true. And the reason I asked about 30 is because that's relevant. So we potentially take capacity for granted. We assume it'll always be there and that there'll be more where that came from. And that isn't true. All things being equal, our capacity and our energy, which I use interchangeably as an idea, it rises to a peak, and that peak is at what age? 30, yeah. And then it starts to go into a long, slow decline. Now, that long, slow decline isn't actually natural. That's not what we're designed to do. But the increasingly sedentary lives that we lead mean that actually we're not getting stronger at a certain age. You know, so in natural capacity, your natural ability to work starts to decline if you're not getting stronger. So if you're not getting stronger, you're getting weaker. And that is being marked out by something called lifestyle diseases. Lifestyle diseases which have grown up in the last 30 years, heart disease, strokes, cancers, depression, diabetes, which weren't around in anything like the numbers that they are now, are directly attributable to the way we work. But of course, demand in our lives doesn't follow suit, doesn't follow this nice curve. It does the opposite. And why is that? Why does demand keep on rising in our lives? I mean, if you look back over the last 18 months, would you say demand has gone up? And if you look over the next year, 2 years, is it going to level out? But is your capacity going to keep on rising to meet that? No, of course not. So we then confront this, which is a demand energy crisis. And it's not some sort of a major event that you see, but at that point, the costs associated with meeting rising demand start to increase. They impact your health, they impact your relationships, and more importantly, they impact your sense of satisfaction, your ability to feel that what you're doing matters. And at that point, a lot of people suffer burnout, and they might end up leaving an industry and leaving jobs they otherwise love because actually they can't cope. And what we're trying to help organizations understand is that we're not designed to do that. We're actually designed to do that and then that. So what's that demand? How's that working? Well, this is a kind of summary of some research we did with eBay. And eBay is quite an interesting client for us because they map onto probably where all of this started. So it all kind of started, the big change in our world started with email in the mid-90s, when it started to become very kind of omnipresent in our lives. And the big change, and people talk about this word work-life balance. You talk about work-life balance? I need some. Well, the problem is that you don't have it anymore, because work-life balance was based on the notion that you stopped work and you went home. Now, when you have your iPhone with you, you are at work, aren't you? And you're not just at work because it's physically there and you can have access to it. Mentally, psychologically, you're in that space. So we live in a blended environment. And the thing that we haven't done is develop a corresponding set of new strategies to deal with the fact that we're in that blended environment. So every time you go into a high negative emotional state because something in your email from a client at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night puts you into that space, do you know how to cope with that? Do you have a coping strategy? Apart from drinking lots of wine. Well, who's teaching us these things? So what we're having to recognize is that we're the first generation to go through this. And we have to adopt new ideas, new ways of coping. Otherwise, the costs associated with this will be, fairly significant to us. So for eBay, they start off here, customer complexity, numbers of competitors, all that kind of stuff is just going through a massive rise. And, I guess that's pretty much the same for all of us here, isn't that? Would that be true? This kind of maps the same sort of level of things. So what we're talking about is not what the traditional training looks at in organizations, which is building your competencies and skills. Stuff that you directly translate into things that you do for your clients and do to manage your business. This is something more fundamental. It sits at the base of all of this. It's your capacity. I have your time right now, but if I don't have your energy, it doesn't matter that I've got your time. I've got undoubtedly a bunch of very ambitious and skilled people who are highly educated, but if I don't have your energy, I can't turn it, and you can't turn it into value. Is that true? And if you think about your clients, and you think about the people that work around you, the same thing. This is a defining quality of how people operate. And what we're teaching our clients to do is to recognize it's the platform on which everything is launched. It's the platform for change, it's the platform for creativity, it's the platform for high performance. So as we heard in the introduction, time is finite. You have 168 hours, and you are not going to do anything to increase that. I bet you wish you could some days, but you can't. But the great thing about energy is it can be expanded. And what we do is we teach people systematically how to build their energy. And it starts off with an understanding that energy is simply, in physics, defined as the capacity to do work. So if you have more energy, you can get more done. And that's, something to really consider. And the starting point is to understand that energy in the human system is multidimensional. At the base, this is all very simple stuff. At the base, it's about the quantity of fuel in your tank. And that's comprised by how you sleep, how you eat, how you exercise, and, as we'll see in a moment, maybe counterintuitively, how you recover during the day. How many of you are encouraged by your bosses to recover during the day as a means of sustaining high performance? Taking a break as a way of, kind of getting that next lift of creativity? No. All right, we'll come back to that. So at the next level, we're talking about the quality of fuel in your tank, your emotions. And I'll talk about this briefly in terms of some ideas to help you think about this. But, how we feel profoundly affects how we perform to a much greater extent than we often acknowledge. But the flip side of that is we have a considerable amount of control that we can exert over how we feel and therefore how we perform and how we think. At the mental level, which we won't cover off today because we don't have enough time, but I'll briefly mention a few things. This is about the raw horsepower of our mind. This isn't about your skills and knowledge. This isn't about what you know. This is about your ability to focus. This is about the quality of our focus, the ability to deeply concentrate. And that's under siege at the moment because of something called multitasking. How many of you think multitasking is pretty much what you have to do in your job? Yeah? Okay. So how smart is multitasking? Is it a good strategy for getting more done? Is it a good thing for doing productivity? Well, the first thing to understand is there's no such thing as multitasking. What there is something called switching time, which is when you move your attention from one thing to another. And NASA were the first people. They coined this phrase called interruption science, where they looked at the ability of individuals to actually multitask. And these are very smart people. They're people who pilot, shuttles. So they're the smartest, fittest people in the world. And their ability to multitask, how good do you think they are at it? They're awful. Absolutely terrible. They can't do it. There's about 5% of the population that can do a very limited form of multitasking, but even then it's appallingly bad. So what we do is we move our attention from one thing to another. And the problem with switching time is that we incur a number of costs. The first is that we add at least 25% extra time to each task. Now, if you're multitasking all day, which I guess some of you are because you're constantly looking at your BlackBerry, you're focusing your attention from the meeting and people are talking about, or your laptop in the meeting, or your iPhone, and then you're switching in and out. Every time you do that, it takes you another 25% of time to engage back into the process that you were in. And if you're doing that during the whole day, you're adding half or a whole day a week in extra downtime. That's the first cost. The second cost is your IQ falls faster than if you were smoking marijuana at work. Well, some of you are going, well, what's wrong with that? But anyway, your IQ falls. So you're thinking less productively, and you're also thinking more superficially. And the third cost is that, when you're in a meeting or when you're on the phone, you have this situation, you're on the phone, and you're talking to a client, you're talking to a colleague, and you hear this clacking going on in the background. And they're going, yeah. And you know what they're doing, don't you? How does it make you feel? Do you feel good about that? No, of course not. So what they're saying to you is you're not worth 100% of my attention, you're worth maybe 30%. And of course you feel devalued in that process, don't you? So that's not particularly good. There's a number of costs associated with multitasking that don't make sense. But of course, you know, in the moment you feel as if, you know, it makes you feel alive because you get this buzz. And as we'll see in a moment, we talk about you know, how human beings respond to habitual behaviors. Every time that thing goes off, that little red light on your BlackBerry, you get a dopamine buzz, don't you? A little hit of pleasure. Because at some point there was a good email in there, and you know, you imagine that somehow that's going to give you the same reward. Of course, it seldom does, but there you go. That's how habits get formed. These three levels of physical, emotion, and mental are the how of energy management. The final level, about spirit, is about a sense of meaning and significance. You know, who am I and what do I want? Am I aligned to what I say I stand for? Is this giving me a sense of purpose in what I do? And that level of energy is probably the most powerful in terms of driving people forward in their lives. So we have these 4 levels of energy. And on your seat, there is something called the energy audit. And what I want you to do very quickly is look at that, and I want you to score yourself. So tick any of the statements that are true or partially true for you. Just give yourself a couple of moments. Okay, so add them up. Give yourself the score. How many of you got 5 or less? No? Okay. 10 or less? So about 7 or 8 of you. All right. 15 or less? Or 15 or more? Okay. All right. So there's 2 ways of looking at this. You can either look at it, you know, if you've got, you know, 15, then, you know, that's a significant part of your energy, your capacity that's compromised. But the flip side of that is you could look at each of those things. Is any of those points a surprise to you when you look at them? No, of course not, because they're all incredibly simple, tangible things. So the first thing to recognize in energy management is that you can't change what you're not paying attention to. And of course, as we get busier and busier in our lives, and as demand you know, picks up, it's very easy to put all of those things and go, yeah, I know I should be doing that. I know I should be eating more healthy. I know I should be getting more sleep. I know I should be exercising. I know I should be spending more time, you know, connecting with my mum and talking to her about things that are going on, and so on. They're all things you know you should be doing. But the problem is that as we get busier and busier, it's easier to put those things down into the category of I must do rather than I am doing.